to MASHmouth, a podcast covering every single episode of the hit 1970s sitcom MASH. I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Ethan.
Ethan, it feels so good to say hello and welcome to MASHmouth again because it has been so long since we've last recorded.
It has been. It's the longest break we've ever taken, we think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Which was for a pretty valid reason, because you took the bar exam. So that's pretty exciting.
I did. It was not an exciting process, but I am glad it's over.
Mm-hmm.
It, funny enough, was actually not as bad as I was expecting it to be.
Good.
Thank you. It is over now, so I get to come back to my favorite podcast, which is ours.
We get to just ramble on about MASH for 24 hours a day. We've been waiting to do this for such a long time, and it feels good to be back on our podcast, but we are also on another podcast while we are away. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, that was also really exciting. So we were guests on the podcast MASH Matters, which we have said before is like the MASH podcast. So that was a huge honor for us. It was so great talking to Ryan and Jeff. They made us feel so at home in the MASH fandom. So it was great. And if you've been living under a rock and you don't know what MASH Matters is, please go check out MASH Matters. It's such a great podcast.
Yeah, it's very professional. It's better than this podcast,
yes.
If I dare say so.
Yes, totally agree.
We highly recommend you check it out because they've got some great stories, and we love it. And thank you to Ryan and Jeff for having us on. It means the world to us. This is the coolest thing we've ever done.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that we've gotten a few new listeners to MASHmouth from the MASH Matters episode that we were on. So we just like to say welcome and, well, welcome back to our other listeners as well.
Yes, welcome everybody. And we hope you enjoy our first episode back. With that, do you want to get into this episode?
Absolutely. So, in this episode, I'll Be Seeing You, an old flame from Hawkeye's past gets assigned to the 4077, leading to some complicated feelings for both parties involved. So, Ethan, what did you think about this episode?
I love this episode. This episode was so interesting to me. I thought it said so much cool stuff about Hawkeye's character and what he's like outside of the war. I felt like this is the kind of episode that I've been looking forward to the whole time, because I am so interested in these characters' home lives. And this is the first time in a long time, maybe not the first time ever, but certainly one of the most impactful times where the home life interacts with this war life. And I love seeing it. This is so interesting to me.
Yeah, I love this episode. I knew this episode was coming. I have obviously seen this episode before, but I wasn't expecting it to hit me in the way that it did. And maybe I'm just really over emotional right now because of the bar exam and all that kind of stuff. But it was just such a great episode, and it really was emotionally impacted me so much. So I really liked this episode more than I remembered.
I hope it emotionally impacted you in the good way, where a really good piece of media could be oh my God, I'm crying. I hope you're not scarred by the emotional turmoil of this episode.
Well, we'll get into it, but why don't we actually jump into the plot of this episode?
Yes, let's do it.
So, this episode starts out as a We're Bored episode, as I like to call it. The guys are obviously not in surgery. They're not getting just swamped with wounded and whatnot. Hawkeye is knitting, which is actually pretty cute, I thought.
He was.
And it's always so funny to me when we have a We're Bored episode and the guys are complaining about being bored. And I'm like, you guys don't understand. You are going to be wishing for this moment when you are flooded with people that you have to operate on. So enjoy it while you can.
Yeah, they are the most needy people. They need stimulation. They need excitement. But also, every time they have actual work to do, they're like, I don't want to do this. I was bored, but now that I have a thing to do, I didn't want this thing. They're very childlike in that way.
Which, honestly, I can't say I blame them, because who wants to be operating on people who have just been shot and almost killed? So, I do understand. So usually the We're Bored episodes, quote unquote We're Bored episodes, the whole plot is them being bored, essentially.
Yeah.
And then shenanigans happen and whatnot. But this one was definitely not that. So we get what the plot is going to be essentially right away, like within the first 30 seconds of this episode, because two nurses pull up in a Jeep and they're new assigned nurses. And lo and behold, one of them is from Hawkeye's past, and a very significant figure in Hawkeye's past, we come to learn.
Yes, this is very exciting. I love when this woman shows up, Hawkeye recognizes her immediately, and then, like, hides, and, like, BJ comments on the fact that he hid from her.
Yup.
This is, like, the ideal friendship for me on a TV show, when they're kind of like two kids making fun of each other. I think it's so funny that they both are grown men, but are prone to these kind of immature reactions over things that they don't like. So they're like, I'm gonna hide, and then I'm gonna make fun of you for hiding.
Yeah, I really liked BJ's quipping of Hawkeye in this episode. Mostly it was focused on this relationship between this mystery nurse, right, and Hawkeye, but we did get some good BJ interaction, which we'll get to. So, like you said, BJ says, oh, you're hiding from her. So, like, what's going on here? So Hawkeye basically explains that this nurse is the one who got away. They were seeing each other back when Hawkeye was a resident in Boston. And I had to note, this man has literally lived everywhere. Residency in Boston, Vermont, Maine, just everywhere. Anyway.
In the 50s, people were just able to pack up and go wherever they please.
Apparently.
That's what I've learned from, like, beatnik stuff. Like, you were just able to go. And now I'm like, wow, I haven't left my home state in 10 months at least. I would love to go somewhere. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it would be so much fun. So as Hawkeye is explaining who this nurse is to him, he says something really interesting. That they were living together. And while that, in today's standards, isn't like too big of a deal, like people move in together pretty quickly all the time.
Yeah, rent's pretty expensive, dog.
Right.
We need roommates, we'll get it done.
Exactly, but that is like a significant step, so it is indicative of their commitment to each other, right? But here's the thing. Is that if they were living together back in the 50s or like the 40s,
they were basically married.
That was huge. And that was honestly probably really scandalous because that was not done back then. You did not, as far as I understand, you did not move in together unless you were married. And so I think that it was really interesting. Obviously was not too big of a consideration in the writers' minds because it was not touched upon like at all. But I think that it's really interesting because Hawkeye is this rule breaker and goes against the norms and stuff like that. And we see that a lot in, you know, his army life. But to know that he's also consistent in that way in his civilian life too, I think that that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it kind of feeds into what we learn about later in their relationship, that the woman did not feel as if Hawkeye was fully committed to her in the proper way. Like, having them live together but not be, like, engaged or married, I'm sure in the time period was like, oh, so you're gonna be with me forever. And then, like, he's apparently too busy with work to, like, really properly, like, focus on her. So, like, that adds to the tension in a way that I wasn't thinking about until you smartly pointed out that the culture at the time was very different than what it is now.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought that was just like a really little interesting tidbit. So as Hawkeye is explaining this, obviously he is very affected by it. And I had to say that the writing and acting in this scene was really, really good because it felt very authentic that Hawkeye was anxious and nervous and, you know, just racking his brain, remembering his relationship with this nurse. Because it felt very real, very authentic. And I thought, again, very continuity of character for Hawkeye because Hawkeye, when he gets nervous, he just yaps. He just talks and talks and talks. And we've seen it before. I can't exactly remember when we've seen it before, but you definitely get the feeling that when Hawkeye is nervous, he just keeps talking. Like, he word vomits a lot. And so he is word vomiting here a lot, not listening to a thing that BJ is actually saying, and just keeps stream of conscious just talking, and I kind of love it.
if you want a specific example of that, look at the episode Hawkeye, where it's entirely a monologue by him because he is nervous to stop talking.
That's true.
So it is very much in character for him. We've had an entire episode centered around that.
That is true. And, okay, so I think we've talked this part to death. So Hawkeye is nervous. This nurse has showed up. The thing that really got me from this scene, which was very small, Hawkeye says to BJ that this nurse, her name is Carly. And BJ says, that's an unusual name. And I think that's so funny because Carly is such a typical name for the 21st century now. I know so many people who are named Carly.
Oh, yeah. I know like 4 of them.
Yeah, exactly. We went to high school with at least 3. So I think that it's really funny. I don't know. It just struck me as very cute.
No, that did stick out to me as well. I was like, wow, 1950s, Carly's unusual name. In 2000s, there's an entire TV show about a girl named Carly. We've changed.
We have changed.
And then with Carly, another thing I like about how this episode is not formatted, but how they kind of escalate things, is that the next thing with them, Carly is with the woman that she came in with, who's not really important to the plot, but they're having this conversation. And then BJ and Hawkeye come to their tent to kind of have an introduction, be like, hey, nice to meet you. And before she even sees Hawkeye, she recognizes his voice. And I thought that was like a great bit of performance and character writing that even before they see each other, they're both kind of on guard about how they're going to interact with each other. And at first they kind of pretend that they don't know each other.
Yeah, I have to say Blythe Danner, who plays Carly, is such a fantastic actress in general, but she was so good in this episode too because she had that like real visceral reaction to the sound of Hawkeye's voice. Like she knew immediately, didn't even have to like turn around to see him. And again, it felt really genuine. So the acting and the writing here was really, really good. And as you said, they kind of pretended not to know each other. And I thought that was really interesting because they were doing this dance around each other, right? Where she was even predicting his jokes before he said them, but she was still
great. That was awesome.
Yeah, she was still kind of pretending though that she didn't know him because I'm sure that she didn't want to explain to her friend like, oh, I was living with this guy and it didn't work out and whatever. So
especially for the 50s. Now that you've talked about that, I'm like, sure.
Right, exactly.
That's probably something you don't address in like mixed company without really knowing the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seemed like these two nurses were friends, but obviously this is part of her past and Hawkeye's past that they don't like talking about because they are very much to each other like the ones that got away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that the joke predicting was quite funny. I loved that. And again, writing wise, it was this really smart way of indicating that they knew each other pretty well because she knew all of his jokes.
Yes, this episode had the energy for me of like a play about a marriage falling apart. Like something by like Edward Albee or like Neil Simon, that kind of just relationship on display kind of drama that they used to do a lot on like, maybe not Broadway, but I feel like that was a more common mode of play than it is now, like a more like popular part of the culture. And, you know, this was basically that. It was like a play condensed into 23 minutes or so of television. And I just really liked it. There have been other episodes that were play-like, but this one, I feel like it was so much about these two characters and their relationship with each other. Like, Frank wasn't even here. Like, it was pretty focused on these two. That I really like. The way the character relationship evolves and then kind of falls apart again was just very expertly done in a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us into our next scene with them, Hawkeye and Carly, meeting for the first time alone. And it's established before Hawkeye even goes to introduce himself to her and the other nurse that Carly is now married. So that kind of puts another
Throws a wrench into the plans.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's like a wrench into the plans, but that just like deepens it a little bit.
Yeah.
So then after that, we get this first scene where Carly and Hawkeye are alone together and kind of just talking. They're kind of like saying hello and dropping the farce a little bit more now. And Hawkeye gives Carly a drink and they cheers to old friends. And Hawkeye hesitates and he says to old friends after she says it, like, oh, it made my heart hurt. Like, he really hesitated there of like, oh, okay, I guess this is what our relationship is now. Like, we're not trying to rekindle an old flame here. We're old friends. I was like, oh, my heart.
The relationship drama is definitely on point with this episode. And I love what this was saying about Hawkeye. That the reason why their relationship kind of didn't work, I don't know if they bring it up in this scene, so I apologize if I'm jumping ahead.
They do. I know exactly what you're going to say. They do.
Okay. But the reason why their relationship didn't work is that Hawkeye was way too focused on being a doctor, working. And I thought that was such an interesting contrast to the Hawkeye that we know, who's like a slacker party animal who will like lock in when needed, but otherwise is a chill guy who's like fun to be around. The idea that Hawkeye at home was this like, you know, maybe fast talker, maybe like fun guy to a degree, but was entirely focused on, I'm a doctor, I need to do the work, was such an interesting contrast to how he is now that I really loved this side of Hawkeye that we get to hear about. It makes him a lot more like dimensional as a character, that he's only this way in this unique environment, and if he was back home, he'd probably be a different guy. I loved hearing about that.
See, I disagree, because I don't think that this was inconsistent with Hawkeye's character. Not to say that you're saying that what she was talking about was inconsistent. I think that we very much see that. Like, Hawkeye is this way at home, too. Like, he takes the work super seriously, but he's also going to, like, play hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't disagree, but in the framing of it being younger Hawkeye kind of working his way through medical school at the time, I'm like, I could 100% understand, like, he was just working like there was no tomorrow, and then maybe breaking up with Carly, like, awoke something in him where he was like, okay, I need to figure out a better balance in my life. Like, that's kind of how I saw it, where it's not like he was 100% serious all the time at home, but there was a time where he was more of a focused person and didn't quite know how to relax. And now that he's in the army doing this, he's like, I need to kind of switch that side of me over to be like, I mostly relax and then I work, rather than doing the opposite.
That's so interesting, because I didn't interpret it that way, like, at all. I was seeing it in terms of Carly was saying that, like, Hawkeye was, of course, dedicated to his work and had this, like, again, this, like, laissez-faire type of attitude about relationships and women and this, that, and the other thing, and that he wasn't ready for this big commitment.
Which I think is still true about Hawkeye. I feel like he is not a guy to commit to anything.
No, definitely not. But it was less of like a balance type of thing, and that his work was always going to come first, and like relationships are always going to come second to him. And Carly kind of saw that she was always going to have to take that like backseat to his career, and she wanted more for herself and wanted more out of her relationship.
Which is very interesting for a woman in the 50s to worry about.
So, like, that's why I really liked her character, too. I really saw both sides of this argument as well. And I thought that this is one of the things that I really loved about Carly's character of wanting more for herself rather than just kind of like submitting to the fact that this is how her relationship was going to be. And so I really liked that she didn't want to miss the opportunities in her life while like waiting for Hawkeye to be stable in what he wanted in his life. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, that's fair. And I like that you're able to disagree with me based on what was in the episode. I like that we have different interpretations of how this relationship works. It means to me that it's well written enough that you can like see different things in it, maybe depending on like the kind of person that you are. I don't know. I love stuff like that, right? Where we're able to have disagreements, but also kind of mutually agree on like the facts of it. It's just our interpretations of how these characters are in the past. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that really goes to show, what good art is, because it's art in itself is open to interpretation, and the writing here is very much open to interpretation depending on, like, I guess, like you said, like where you see the relationship, where you are personally, stuff like that. So I think that that's really cool, and especially when we disagree on how something is framed, because you and I typically see the same things all the time. So having a different interpretation is so cool to me, and why I'm like, yeah, it's so cool. And it's just like, no, it's just normal minds. So you can see at one point in this scene where they're kind of having it out, they're having this argument, kind of stuff that was either left unsaid originally or is that they just haven't dealt with themselves. And Carly tries to drop it, and Hawkeye is still like really visibly upset by this. So again, you can tell how much she meant to him, and again, it first broke my heart. But we get go ahead.
By the way, I just think it's funny that we find out that her new husband's name is Doug. I feel like Doug and Gary are like go-to like unlikable guy names. I don't know what is wrong. Like, I apologize to all the Dougs and Garys out there, but on TV shows, if there's a third party that you're not meant to like, it is usually Doug. Just something about the name Douglas. I don't know, like, if there's a comedy writer out there who's wronged by a guy named Doug and has snuck that way into, like, everything. But it's, like, shorthand for, like, I don't like that guy. His name is Doug. I'm like, okay, sure.
It's funny.
A normal guy name.
It's funny because I have multiple Douglases in my family, my extended family, all pretty unlikable. So
it does hold true.
It holds up.
Hold true.
It does hold up. So anyway, so then we get to what is going to be the impediment to their friendly work relationship. Hawkeye is kind of being an ass to Carly in the operating room. And I just have to say, Margaret was not in this episode.
No, she wasn't. We didn't have Margaret or Frank.
But here's the thing, is that I felt Margaret in this episode. Because Margaret would be very, very irritated by this dynamic. She would not like this dynamic at all, because if there's one thing that she does not want, it's the doctors and the nurses to be too wrapped up in their personal lives and their personal business with each other, without each other, who knows, to have their emotions impact their work. And that's exactly what was happening here. And Carly said, should I not be assigned to you anymore? And Hawkeye was kind of being like a jerk to her and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, Margaret would be tearing her head off right now.
That's really funny. I love that you can clock stuff like that. Of like, we need Margaret just to be the moderator of the nurses. But in terms of their argument, I love that their argument was sparked by something relatively minor, where Carly says, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then Hawkeye responds by saying, "Oh, so we're saying we're sorry now." Just very like off the cuff, very like quick Hawkeye quip that he didn't even think about. And that turns into like well, obviously, like, we cannot work together.
Yeah.
Like, escalating that quickly, I thought was very real for two people who have a lot of history of like, I know what that one word means. I know that you mean a lot more than just saying that one thing. This is obviously on your mind. I know you well enough. It's going to be easier for both of us if we don't work together. Like, that quickly, based off of one thing said.
Yeah. And that kind of transitions us into this next scene where Hawkeye and Carly go off together, and Hawkeye says, "Hey, listen, I can't work with you unless we kind of like bury this hatchet here." And he says, like, you broke my heart, and I'm like really upset about it still. And Carly's like, "LOL, same dude, but I was not gonna wait for you and take a back seat." But that's the thing, is that it's not that what I really liked about this too was that it's not like Carly was this woman who was just like, "Yep, you sucked so bad that I had to like get out of there."
Right.
She was also really upset by this. She loved Hawkeye as much as Hawkeye loved her, but she also knew that she was not going to be happy with him. So, and that hurt, and seeing it hurt on screen.
Yeah. Like, I feel like a worse show like this would be like, of course we like Hawkeye. Hawkeye's our hero. Let's make this woman the evil woman. And it's not that. She's just kind of like a full person. Like, you understand, or at least I understand. I don't know about everyone in the world, but as an audience, like, I understand where she's coming from. I understand why she feels this way. She's not evil. She's justified. And they're both kind of wrong about this and both sympathetic enough where it is like an interesting kind of complicated like relationship situation that goes beyond the typical like sitcom thing of like, well, at the end of the episode, Hawkeye may be upset, but we're going to reveal that Carly is evil the whole time, so don't feel bad about it. There's never like that moment, and I like that a lot.
And that's the thing. I feel like neither of them are wrong. It's just a bad situation. Like, both of them are actually right, and it's just a bad situation where they just can't get it to work.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. I liked that she wasn't this evil person, like, oh, she broke Hawkeye's heart, so she must be a bad person. Like, no, that's just not what it was. And then also in this scene, Hawkeye, again, is saying, you broke my heart. And it was actually really endearing because Hawkeye was being such a romantic, because my favorite line, we usually save lines, but this is important. When he says, you came into the camp that first day and I heard this strange sound. It was my heart beating again. And I was like, this is killing me. This is killing me right now. It was so painful.
If someone said that in real life, that would be like crazy to say. I would think about that for years. If somebody said that to me, because that is the most like poetic thing someone could come up with, like off the cuff.
Yes, it was, and that's the thing, is that it felt so genuine too. Like he was like really feeling it. But
I love that he says there hasn't been anyone other than you. And at first it's like, first time watching this, I was like, of course that he's lying. He's had like many girlfriends. And then he goes on to clarify as being like, there have been imitations, there have been facsimiles, but no one has actually I haven't felt the way about someone that I have for you. I'm like, oh my God, that's why he like can't have an actual girlfriend. That's why he's got these one-off like, I'll sleep with you episodes. Because he's like, he doesn't feel strongly about any of them, except for his, like, long-lost girlfriend that he loves and misses.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It was all coming through. I'm sweating thinking about it because I'm so upset. I'm so upset by this. But yeah, it was quite emotionally painful. So that was... here's the thing. I enjoyed watching it. I love being an emotional fan. So
big, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, like Edward Albee vibes, just condensed into a 25-minute sitcom.
Yes.
Like, this episode barely had jokes. This is like basically a drama. We say that a lot, but usually the drama episodes are like war focused, not like super interpersonal relationship focused. But this episode is entirely like, yes, they're on a military camp, and it's important that they're on a military camp. But the war does not factor into their emotional turmoil in this episode. It's entirely
not really.
like, oh, we're back together, and we don't like the fact that we still feel this way about each other. Yes. I just great episode all around.
So speaking of that too, they do end up kind of rekindling their relationship, and they start this affair. And
which made me feel bad. I was like, oh no, like you're supposed to be like happy about it, but I was like, oh no, she's married. This is not good. This isn't good for her.
Yeah, so that is kind of what I wanted to get into in this tail end of the episode, because BJ is kind of making Hawkeye think about why this might not be morally correct. You know what I mean? This is kind of a direct rebuff on Hawkeye sleeping with a married woman. And I really thought it was interesting because this is definitely not how cheating is handled in the first 3.5 seasons of this show. And I really thought that it was this interesting kind of twofold thing, right? Where we've seen how cheating for married women is handled a lot differently in the show in previous seasons, where cheating was kind of more condoned or understood or whatever the case was.
Yeah.
And so it's this double standard type of thing for like cheating women versus cheating men. But also, I thought that this scene where BJ is doing the absolute most to be able to talk to Peg on the phone at home kind of also showed the audience where the show was kind of standing and where it was heading in terms of like extramarital affairs and stuff like that, because it was less condoning cheating in general, and also kind of showing us that little bit of a double standard for cheating men and cheating women.
Mm-hmm. The contrast of this scene versus how characters viewed cheating in the earlier seasons was like very apparent. Like, I'm sure this was highly intentional. Like we talked about many times before, that with like the creation of BJ and Potter, the writers very consciously were like, okay, let's do the opposite of what we had before to kind of bring a new dynamic and make things more interesting. And this was a real highlight to how BJ's character really contrasts someone like Trapper, where he was like not ever going overboard with like the guilt trips or anything, but being like, I'm the angel on your shoulder. Like, you know this is wrong. I know this is wrong. And I have the experience to back it up. Like, I, BJ, love my wife very dearly. And like that, I think, I don't know, like makes it more impactful versus like Trapper saying this, who like also has a wife, but like kind of didn't care a lot of the time that he was married, you know?
Yeah.
And also, like, the cheating in this episode, I think, goes deeper than it usually does.
Absolutely.
Usually it is, like, a sexual thing, just like a hookup. Not, we're going to get married is how Hawkeye kind of spins out towards the end of this. Like, it's very emotionally charged for him. So there was a great highlight of how these characters interact with each other and like see each other and kind of understand. BJ understands what Hawkeye needs to hear in this moment in like a great way that I thought was like an excellent use of his character.
Yeah, and I mean, if not for this next part where Radar bursts in and says, hey, Carly just put in for a transfer. I don't know if Hawkeye would have necessarily taken BJ's advice of like, you're doing something a little bit morally reprehensible by having an affair with a married woman. But I think that Hawkeye might self-reflect a little bit in this next coming scene of, yeah, this probably isn't okay, because he goes to Carly's tent and says, like, what the hell? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why are you requesting this transfer? And she says to him that she wants a divorce from her husband. And I'm like, that takes guts. More guts than, say, Frank Burns.
50s? That's insane.
But, like, that's the thing, is that she knows that she doesn't want to be with him, right? Like, Hawkeye has awoken these feelings in her. And so she obviously is like, okay, well, like, I don't want to be with this guy because I settled for him, whatever the case is.
Doug.
She doesn't want to be advertising Doug anymore. So, and she says, I want a divorce. Hawkeye says, well, that means that we can be together forever. She goes, no, we're still having the same problems that we were having before.
I like this a lot. There's a part of me that wishes this was a little more than like an episodic sitcom. Like, I kind of want Carly to stick around for like, maybe not the entire series, but like a few more episodes to kind of see how like this relationship evolves a little bit more. I kind of wish that these episodes didn't have to be so self-contained. I wanted more of this because this is such an interesting thing for Hawkeye to have to deal with. But her saying like, no, I want a divorce and I'm leaving here, I think it does a good job to, again, kind of make her own character.
Yeah.
That she's not this like prize to be won by Hawkeye, you know, like she's getting divorced. And also she's leaving Hawkeye. She's not getting the divorce for Hawkeye because she kind of now understands that both relationships are not healthy for her and she has to be single for a while. Is a very interesting, kind of powerful way for this character to conclude the episode.
Like I said, I really liked how Carly's character was written, how she was coded as very independent from the very beginning of, like, she was her own person and not just this, like, weird extension of Hawkeye's past. And again, I liked that she made the hard decision here of wanting to get the divorce. And recognizing that nothing has changed with Hawkeye, unfortunately, that he backs himself up into a corner literally when he's talking about being with her forever.
Which I thought was amazing. I thought that was really good directing.
It was, absolutely. But it was also so indicative of his commitment issues. Like, he still has the same issues that she left him for in the first place. And then, unfortunately, her marriage now seems to be, like, kind of this, like, oh, okay, so this person is going to put me first, not necessarily that they are the right person. And again, I love that for her. She's willing to give up what she wants most in Hawkeye and go be her own person and be truly happy. But it didn't stop me from being emotionally gutted by this. And like we always say, don't condone cheating. We don't like cheating. But man, oh man, I really hope that at some point these two can kind of like work it out after the war. Maybe Hawkeye will grow up a little bit. Yeah. No, I really hope so, because man, their chemistry on screen too was just like palpable. It was so good.
Yes, I think this was very good. I think everything about her character makes sense why this is the girl for Hawkeye. Like we were talking about, like she is very independent, very like strong-headed, and from what I know about Hawkeye, I'm like, he wouldn't want just like a submissive, like whatever you want you can have kind of like girlfriend. He would want someone who like has her own life, and I feel like that's really well captured here, where I feel like Hawkeye would find like a more like, okay, I'm your girlfriend kind of person to be boring. I think that's like a fun part of this episode where we do get just a little bit more insight of like what Hawkeye is like looking for in a relationship.
Yeah.
By Carly being so strong-headed.
Yeah, definitely. And so basically the episode ends with Carly saying that she put in the request for the transfer and she requested that they speed it up. And then this last scene with Hawkeye and BJ in the swamp, and Hawkeye is kind of reflecting, and I think that I would hope that he kind of took into account what BJ was talking about of like, you know, maybe don't fall in love with married women, Hawkeye, that's not okay.
Yeah.
But he said, like, the last line of the show was, in some ways I don't mind that she's gone again. It's just that she never altogether leaves. And that's so heartbreaking. And I am such a sucker for these storylines of like loving someone so much, but just not being able to make it work out. And I don't know, it just left you with this really sad feeling, but it was also really just like a really good cap to the episode as well.
Yeah. Wrong place, wrong time kind of relationship.
Yes.
So like, oh my God, devastating. I hate it.
Yeah.
And I love that they took the time to do this, because it's not very funny at all. It's very, very dramatic, and I thought everyone involved did a great job. I really love this one.
Yeah, really leaning into the drama in this dramedy. So, speaking of not being quite a comedy in this episode, did you have any favorite lines?
Yes. One of my favorite lines was that Carly asks Hawkeye if he has any children, and Hawkeye goes, "Children? No, I'm still my only child." And I love that. I kind of want that on a t-shirt for when I'm like 40 and don't have children. That is like my vibe. I'm like, I'm my own child. Thank you very much.
I really loved, this was not a line necessarily, but in this episode there were some filler scenes with Colonel Potter kind of painting random people in the camp, like Radar and Klinger, just kind of, again, the we're bored aspect of this, and he's just doing his favorite pastime of painting. And Radar does this turtle impression.
Yes.
Obviously, I cannot recreate it because it's a visual piece of comedy, but it is so good. It's literally a turtle. He looks like a turtle. It's crazy.
It's incredible. I hope that Gary Berghoff brought that to them and somebody wasn't like rude to him, being like, "Yo, homie, you look like a turtle. Can you do a turtle impression?" I hope he organically was like, "I got a turtle impression in my back pocket." But yeah, this was great. I love this little, not even B-plot, just like filler, like you said. I love Potter's painting skills, and I love when Radar is done doing his turtle impression, he does an impression of some comedian or someone from like the 50s who I'm unfamiliar with. And then at the end of his impression, Potter didn't like it. He's like, that was it. And I just love that like weird kind of comedy where like the joke is something being so not funny that it becomes funny. I don't know. Like, I love that kind of willingness, you know?
Yeah, it was very good. I liked these little filler scenes. They were pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
So my other favorite line also was so funny. This is so strange. When Hawkeye is finding out from Radar that Carly is married, Klinger says, lots of women are married. My wife is married. Somehow that makes her more exciting. And I love it. And then Radar follows up with, you're weird.
Yes. This is, again, that was a very natural interaction. I feel like if somebody said that, I would have the impulse to say, you're weird if I knew them well enough. But also, I kind of love that for Klinger, that he finds his wife more exciting by being married. I feel like that's like the opposite of the usual like wife bad thing. You know, you're like, I love my wife. I love that she's married to me. It's very fun.
You're so cute and innocent, and here's why. Because he was basically saying like, no, it makes her more interesting because like it's like a weird like role play thing of like, I'm fucking a married woman. I'm
not disagreeing with that.
You're funny.
But in the context of my wife is married, I just think it's a very funny thing to be like, oh, hell yeah, dude, let's go.
It is funny.
So, Vanessa, do you have any trivia for us in our return episode?
You know I do, Ethan. So, I have trivia on Blythe Danner, who played Carly Breslin Walton in this episode.
I'm very excited to hear about this actress's career.
You should be, because she had an extensive one. Okay, so Danner was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1943. She graduated from a private Quaker high school in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is the county right outside of New Jersey, and I've been there many a times.
I think I have too, actually.
Danner is a graduate of Bard College, and she started her acting career in theater in both on- and off-Broadway productions of musicals and plays in the late 60s and early 70s. She won a Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Play for her performance in the 1970 play Butterflies Are Free.
Awesome. We love a Tony winner.
And that's not all, actually, for her theater career. So she continued theater throughout her career, including being in the plays and musicals New York Idea and Betrayal. No, hang on. Sorry, those are both plays.
Okay, that's fine.
One second. She continued theater throughout her career, including being in the plays New York Idea and Betrayal, both of which she was nominated for a Tony Award for Best Actress in a Play.
So she's like a real celebrated Broadway star is what I'm hearing.
Oh, yes. So she was also in Follies, Much Ado About Nothing, A Streetcar Named Desire, Carousel, All About Eve, Nice Work If You Can Get It, and The Country House. And in 2015, Danner was inducted into the American Theater Hall of Fame.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. She had such a long career.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised that theater was such a big part of her career because I actually had no idea.
I mean, everybody loves Much Ado About Nothing. That's a classic Shakespeare comedy that everyone likes to make a meal out of.
And A Streetcar Named Desire. I think that everybody who has ever done theater has probably done a rendition of A Streetcar Named Desire.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on from her theater career, Blythe Danner's first film role was in a movie called To Kill a Clown, which she starred in opposite Alan Alda.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense why the chemistry was so good then.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, because this episode aired in 1976 and the movie was in 1972, so, not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode of MASH was still really early on in her career, and she was definitely kind of like a rising star when this episode aired.
Yeah, I really want to check out the film career of Alan Alda. It seems like an interesting little pocket that I'm sure we can discuss greatly.
Well, I can guarantee you that will be coming up in an episode at some point.
Yes.
So I found this really kind of funny and interesting for the MASH crowd. One of Danner's first television roles was in Columbo, and she also starred in a show called Adam's Rib. And that's funny because
my God,
MASH,
of course.
you know?
We'll never escape Adam's Rib.
No,
we will
no,
find
we will not.
new references to it all the time.
So Danner also starred in the 1979 movie called The Great Santini alongside Robert Duvall and Michael O'Keefe, another MASH alum.
Many MASH. That's awesome.
Yeah. So other movies Danner has been in include Future World, The Prince of Tides, I'll See You in My Dreams, The Lucky Ones, and the Meet the Parents series, including the movies Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers, and Little Fockers, which I feel like you would know.
I actually have not seen any of the Little Fockers, Meet the Parents trilogy, but apparently it is up my alley. I like Ben Stiller under the right circumstances. And Prince of Tides, gotta give Barbra Streisand a shout out. Love her directorial career.
Was that her?
Yeah, she directed it. Very strange career that she has as a filmmaker.
Okay.
That I'm kind of obsessed with.
I love that. So, Danner was also in the movie adaptation of Joyce Carol Oates' We Were the Mulvaneys in 2002, for which she received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Miniseries or Movie. And just a little tidbit for you, which you can cut out if you want. This book almost caused me to not graduate high school because I had it for so long from our high school library that they were like, if you don't return this, you will not graduate.
That happened to my brother. He had a copy of The Crucible just like in the back of his bedroom for like a year. And they're like, yo, homie, you gotta return that like now.
Yeah.
When we graduated, I stole a copy of Catcher in the Rye from The Office because I thought it'd be funny.
Damn. And Danner also received a nomination for both an Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Miniseries or Movie and a Golden Globe Award nomination for her role in the adaptation of Ann Tyler's novel Back When We Were Grown-Ups in 2004.
Okay. So, not an EGOT winner, but certainly well nominated across the board. That's, we love to hear it.
Definitely. And also, Danner was in a lot of TV shows in both starring and guest roles, including St. Elsewhere, Huff, which she also won an Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a drama series in 2005. So, Great. Again, very, very decorated. She was in Nurse Jackie and what I know her best from, which is Will and Grace, where she played the main character, Will's mom.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, again, about her decorations in outstanding acting, she was nominated twice for an Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Comedy Series for this part in Will and Grace. And I think that's so funny.
Let me tell you, there's nothing better than an Emmy-winning mom role. It's just like the best role an older actress can have for a sitcom.
Truly. So besides her acting career, Danner is also an environmental activist and healthcare activist. She advocated for recycling, conservation, and has joined advocacy groups for clean air initiatives. Danner's husband passed away from oral cancer, which led Danner to become involved in the Oral Cancer Foundation and do a number of public service announcements about oral cancer, raised funds for oral cancer research, and has advocated for communities experiencing healthcare disparities.
We love a healthcare advocate
yes.
and an environmental advocate. Just seems like a very good lady is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you know this, Ethan, but this is pretty common knowledge. Danner is the mother of Gwyneth Paltrow and director Jake Paltrow, and she is also the aunt of actress Catherine Monig.
I did not know that. I kind of assumed Gwyneth Paltrow just kind of sprouted out of the earth one day. I'd never considered her mother. That's really cool, though.
Yeah.
Gwyneth Paltrow, great actress in the right material, and she is a very talented mom.
Yeah. And Danner actually co-starred in 2 movies with Gwyneth Paltrow. In 1993 called Cruel Doubt, and in 2003 called Sylvia, which is a biopic about Sylvia Plath.
Oh, okay.
And Danner is still alive today, and she's still working. Her most recent role was in the 2023 film Happiness for Beginners.
Excellent. We love a long career. I love when people are still working when we cover them on trivia.
Yeah.
It's just nice to hear, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a little bit of trivia about Mary Jo Catlett, who played Nurse Walsh, Carly's friend in this episode.
I'm excited to hear this. She seems like a very fun character actor.
So you're going to really like this trivia, I think. So Catlett was born in Denver, Colorado in 1938. She has a sister who is a nun, which I thought was pretty interesting. Catlett is another actress with a lot of theater credits, actually. She was in Hello, Dolly from 1964 to 1970 for the Broadway tour of the show. She was also in Canterbury Tales, Different Times, The Music Man, and The Wedding Singer, among several others.
All classic. That's a really good run for Broadway shows.
Yeah. And Catlett is probably best known for her role as the voice of Mrs. Puff in the SpongeBob SquarePants series.
Excuse me? What? When you said that I would love this trivia, I was like, it's going to be some character in some dumb cartoon. I did not think that I'd hear SpongeBob trivia in this recording of MASHmouth today. Thank you for blessing me with this.
Yeah, I thought when I found that out, I thought that was so amazing. So other than that, Catlett's other best-known role is as a housekeeper in the show Different Strokes, in which she was a main character. And besides that, she has been in several other shows in guest roles such as Kojak, Alf, Murder, She Wrote, Night Court, my favorite, Kim Possible, American Dad, Modern Family, Resilient Isles, and Good Girls, just to name a few.
Okay, long career and has the classic MASH, Murder, She Wrote crossover going on.
Yeah.
So that's excited.
And Catlett is still alive today, and she is also still working, but describes herself as basically retired besides her voice work in SpongeBob and its spin-off properties.
If you're Mrs. Puff, you're doing that for as long as you can do that.
Yeah, of course. So what I thought was also interesting about Catlett's character in this episode was that Carly requested the transfer, but we didn't really get to know what happened with her friend. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is that Catlett shows up in a few other episodes down the road in MASH. So she exciting. Stayed. So that's pretty cool.
I love that continuity. That's exciting. I love that.
Yeah, she will show back up relatively soon in the next season.
That's great. I'm excited to see her again. She seems like a very fun character. I'm glad that we get to see more than just one scene with her.
Yeah, it's exciting. Okay, Ethan, what was your martini rating for this episode?
I think this is a perfect episode to come back on because let me tell you, 5 out of 5 martinis, no notes. I really love this one. I'm glad that we are talking about it after such a long break between talking about MASH. I'm glad to be back.
Me too. Again, 5 out of 5. Totally drunk on this episode, and yeah, I can't.
Drunk and crying about our exes is how we feel.
Just drunk and crying over our emotions on this episode. This was a great one to come back to. I'm really happy that we're back. Okay, so just to wrap up, we'd like to give thanks to Jacob Ferrabelco for being our technical consultant, Melissa, my sister, for cover art, and of course our listeners. Thank you so much. Our music, social media, and contacts for the show are linked in the description as always, and join us next week for Season 4, Episode 24, Deluge. But until then, try painting your coworker wearing only a towel. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Bye, everyone.